Hello everyone, I am back with another astrology Decan video. So we are now going to review Gemini second Decan, which is the Nine of Swords. So here I have a couple of cards. I'll go ahead and move this and we can get started. So again, the card representing Gemini second Decan is the Nine of Swords. This Decan generally runs from about June 1st to June 11th. And as we can see here, it's a pretty intense little card to have for this Decan. Here we can see on the card that we have Mars in Gemini. So Mars is the planet that's going to be kind of in charge during this time. Here I have our lovely Gemini card, which is represented by the Lovers. Another card I have here is Mercury, and that's because Mercury is like the main boss planet. It's the planet that's in charge of the entire zodiac sign. So I like to keep that main planet always around so we can keep that in mind. Here I have Mars, which is represented by the Tower. I also have Venus because this is a zodiac sign that forms a triplicity with Libra. So Libra is the next air sign. If you went in order, you would see that Libra is the next one in line for the air signs. So Venus rules Libra. So therefore, these two cards here, Libra and Venus, are just going to be hanging out with us. All right, so let's go ahead and do a little bit of a deeper dive here. Let's see here. So I think what I see a lot with this Decan is the speed that comes with the Mercury planet and a bit of that destruction that comes in from the Mars. So I think that something that might be good to keep in mind during this time of year is that we're very much so at the middle of at least the chronological new year. If we start in January, we're 6 months into the year here. And that's typically a time when we start to kind of assess our situation. How much progress have we made for our goals or towards those goals that we set at the beginning of the year? How are we measuring up? So this is something that came in mind when I saw this card. It made me think of like being haunted by all those things that we sometimes, just can't find the time to do, or just being overwhelmed by this sense of maybe obligation or, our to-do list or all this kind of stuff. So that's something that definitely came to mind when I saw this card. And I think it's something good for us to keep in mind as we move into June. It is good to, evaluate where we're at with our goals and kind of, how close or how far we are in our progress. Just have some time to assess our situation. But, it's also nice to just not get overwhelmed by the anxiety that can sometimes come from trying to achieve something, manifest our dreams, however you want to phrase that. I think that Mars here is great because it shows us that when we're not on track to achieving those things that we want to, or to, our fate or our destiny or whatever, things kind of start to fall apart. Right? And so I think that's what we see here. This character is definitely starting to kind of undo themselves, right? They're being tortured somewhat. They can't rest very easily, and they're just being haunted by whatever it is that has happened in the past. So it's a little bit of like, I guess, karma maybe, or anxiety over the future, the time that's still left in the year possibly, or the week that's coming up, that kind of thing. So again, nice to remember that while the Tower is kind of stressful and, as we can see here, definitely a card of like destruction, let's say. It's ultimately to set us back on our correct track. So if we are feeling a bit of anxiety, it's good to kind of make sure we evaluate that as well. Sometimes anxiety is just because we're overwhelmed by our environment, we're overstimulated, what have you. But sometimes anxiety does serve a purpose, in that it shows us or indicates to us, right, that like something's not right, something is off, and we kind of need to address something major in our day to day. So, along with that, here, as I look over the Magician card, which represents Mercury, I like to remember that the mind is a powerful tool, I'll call it. It's something that we can use as a force for good or for evil, or I won't say evil, but for good or bad. Sometimes it can kind of torture us and just, keep us awake at night and all of that. But also, it can be a really magical thing that can help us to come back to rationality. So it's good to, with Mars in Gemini, to kind of keep things in perspective. Mars is a very passionate planet. It wants things quick and fast and just, like lightning speed, basically. But oftentimes, things that are worthwhile take a while. They take their time. And so it's, I think, good to remember here with the Magician card that our thoughts create our reality. And so it's good to have drive and ambition and to be, fast and have a direction that we're going in. But it's also good to just kind of make sure that we're taking measured steps and that we have that positive self-talk as well. We don't want to be delusional in our self-talk. We don't want to just give ourselves false hope or, false pats on the back when we don't really deserve that. But we don't want to be overcritical of ourselves either. So again, Mercury just reminds me that during this time of the year, it's nice to keep in mind that our thoughts create our reality. So what kind of thoughts do we want to have? What kind of reality do we want to have? We can make the path towards our goals bitter and hard, or we can make the path more pleasant and easygoing. And our thoughts are a big contributor to that. And so Gemini here, the Lovers card, reminds us of those choices that we have to deal with. So making sure that we pick the things that are good for us, not just the things that sound fun in the moment, as we're entering kind of the summer season a little bit. Things are heating up around us. The weather's really nice. There are so many temptations in the world around us during this time. And that's what I see reflected with the Lovers card. It's about, we're pulled by the heart, but our mind maybe knows better. As the seasons start to change, we want to be, have easy going, have fun, go fishing, be laid back. But sometimes we have a lot of responsibilities during this time. Things may be heating up in our career or, in just our day-to-day lives. So it's good to remember to make good choices for ourselves, so that we don't have to face these nighttime demons, and we can just rest easy knowing that, hey, we've done the best that we can, given, the options that we have or whatever. And then here with Libra and Venus is kind of that forming that triplicity with as an air sign, as a fellow air sign. It's about, weighing our options, like I said, nurturing those things that are good for us, nurturing those thoughts that are good for us, making those positive choices, that kind of thing. I know that as I did some research into this decan, there's a lot of mention about how the second decan can be very duplicitous, which is kind of something that's associated with Gemini, I think, in general, just because of that twin energy, but it just makes me think of, again, those times when maybe we kind of lie to ourselves, and so it's good to kind of really face those hard truths. Are we being honest with ourselves? Are we doing the best that we can to achieve our goals, or, to just do the next best thing in our life? So There were a lot of just associations with duplicity, with being a trickster, with this really sexual nature, I guess, as a way of like getting your reward, I guess your quick reward in that sense, not necessarily doing things out of true love, but rather just like that lust that comes with that Mars energy. And so those are all just things to keep in mind as we travel through these next 10 or so days. What are the best choices that we can make for ourselves? How do our thoughts create our reality? What are those things that we're nurturing as we move forward in the year? And with that, I think I'd like to wrap it up, and I'll finish by reading this really great poem that I heard some time ago, and maybe some of you guys might be familiar with it. It's called The Man in the Glass. I'm not sure. I found it attributed to this writer called Peter Dale Wimbrow, but I'm not 100% sure if they're actually the author or, creator of this poem or not. But regardless, The Man in the Glass is a beautiful poem. I'll go ahead and read it because I think it has some connection to this decan here. And I feel like to Gemini in general with that kind of twin energy, good and evil, and that kind of thing. So let me go ahead and read the poem now. I hope that you guys enjoy it. So, The Man in the Glass. When you get what you want in your struggle for self and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's the fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear to the end, and you've passed your most difficult, dangerous test if the man in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. All right. I just think that's such a beautiful poem that kind of hones in on these themes of being true to ourselves, being honest with ourselves about the lives that we live each and every day, so that we, in the end, are good with ourselves. We're not living to impress our friends or our family members or just the general public, but really, getting right with ourselves and living from that authentic place. Because in the end, that's really what matters. You can't really lie to yourself. Well, you can, but then you'll end up like this little person here, and we don't want that. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.